Yo, my beats, they are hard.
Edition of the BCSN Sports Wrap. Brian Fulford here, joined by my normally regularly scheduled co-host, AD Drew, this week as we get ready to wrap up week number 7 in the black college football landscape. AD, how you doing, my man?
I'm doing fine, Dr. B. Happy homecoming to all the 12 schools that hosted homecoming on this past weekend and the 11 schools that will be hosting homecoming this upcoming weekend.
Wow, yeah, definitely plenty of homecoming festivities for those 12, and then as you said, 11 coming up this upcoming weekend. So these are definitely the two biggest weeks during the year for everyone and their homecoming festivities. Unlike last week, though, as we'll find out here shortly, it wasn't all roses for the homecoming teams. Last week, I think, it was 7-0 for homecoming teams last week. And this week, as we'll talk about a little bit later, it was not quite as solid a sweep.
That would be correct, Brian. That would be correct.
All right. Well, look, we want to encourage you, if you're listening to the show or watching us on via our Facebook or YouTube stream, interact with us. Give us a note. First off, follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Send us a message at MyBCSN1. That's the username, and that's the number 1 at MyBCSN1 on Instagram and Twitter. That's also how you can find us on Facebook. You can also find our BCSN Sports Wrap show there on Facebook. And as we go through this show, if you want to reach out and you hear something from myself or AD, hit us up personally on Twitter. For AD, you can find him at BCSN Drew, DREW, and you can find me at DRB365. Well, AD, let's jump right into the week number 7, and of course, let's start with a matchup. Let's just start with the conference that we have 4 teams in our BCSN top 5 D1 poll. 5 teams from the MEAC in this poll, and we're going to start with what was probably by far and away the most anticipated game, the game of the week, and that was Florida A&M traveling to Orangeburg, South Carolina, and this was, obviously the setup, there was a lot of setup with this game, AD. The fact that FAMU had not won there in almost in the career of Buddy Pugh, which is like 15, 16 years. FAMU has only won 1 time, and that was in 2011, I believe. And I think even that win had to be later vacated. So I don't know if you officially count that, or we just know that FAMU won that game, but unfortunately, in the record books, it had to be vacated. And then you also had Buddy Pugh, who was needing this win or a win to break Willie Jeffries' record for all-time career wins as a coach at South Carolina State. And of course, he is currently tied at 128. So just your initial thoughts coming into this ball game, AD, because we didn't get a chance to really talk too much, but what were your initial thoughts coming into this game?
Number 1, about the vacated win. Did the Fab Five play in 2 consecutive Final Fours?
They did. It happened.
Even though the NCAA record book says it did. That's how I feel about that vacated win. But digressing back to the matchup going in, this matchup was everything that you thought it was going to be. It was a fun, it was an exciting game. It was a game where you knew some record was going to get broken in that game. Either it was going to be by the South Carolina State coach, or it was going to be by the Florida A&M quarterback. But you knew records were going to fall in this particular game, Brian, and a record did fall in this game. Now, tell us which one of those it was, Brian.
Well, the easiest one that had to fall, I mean, short of some kind of strange happening, it was Ryan Stanley, FAMU's quarterback. He came into the contest just 27 yards shy of becoming the all-time career passing leader for FAMU. And he did actually hit that mark in the first quarter, where, he did set the record, his own, he would later go on to set his personal record, but he did become the all-time passing yardage leader in this contest. And as we talk about this first half of this ball game was a pretty dominating performance by the Florida A&M defense, holding South Carolina State to just 65 yards of total offense in the first half. But it was some mistakes, some turnovers by Florida A&M that actually benefited South Carolina State and gave them an opportunity to be tied up at halftime. And I'm talking about a pick six in the red zone by Stanley that was returned 88 yards for a touchdown, and then a block punt, which led to another touchdown for South Carolina State. So the special teams and the defense picking up 14 points for South Carolina State, but FAMU did answer. Actually, FAMU scored first in the ball game, and then they later answered after throwing the pick six. Your thoughts on the first half of this ball game?
Well, I was going back and forth between this game and the game that you were actually broadcasting on, Brian, the Edward Waters Allen homecoming game. And, you're right. Florida A&M totally dominated the first half of this particular game, and it looked like it was going to be a blowout very, very early. But a couple of simple mistakes by Florida A&M, special teams, and it's amazing when you have an All-American punter back there, and then you have mistakes in the punting game by Florida A&M. It's really shocking. It's really shocking. All you have to do is give this man some type of protection, and his foot is probably your best defense that you have, because he's going to pin the other team deep. And if he has the opportunity to pin him inside the 20, he's going to do it. So this is something that Coach Willie Simmons is going to have to correct, because this is not the first game where the coverage, the punt coverage has failed Florida A&M on this particular year, Brian.
Yeah, and it is something that I had the pleasure of speaking with Coach Simmons, and so that is a supplement that you will be able to hear. It won't necessarily be filtered in with this particular show, but it'll be a supplement that you can hear that we will publish. And we talked to Coach. I talked to Coach about that, and that is something that even with as good as a punting and special teams unit as FAMU has, there have been those mistakes. And the first punt there by South Carolina State was definitely, they saw something in the film, and they called on their punt rush, and they really went after it full steam. And that punt ended up being blocked by Terrence McCray of South Carolina State. And you'll hear me mention him a little bit later, but it ends up resulting in a touchdown. And so that and the interception, in which it was one of those interceptions that look, it was a situation where Stanley was scrambling. He got turned around. And, when you get spun around 360 and you sort of see a teammate, you see a white jersey, you think he's open. And I think he got spun around. He saw his teammate in the flat by the sideline, and he just threw it and didn't even really think about or really focus and see that, oh, no, there's a guy in a red jersey right there between me and my teammate. And, give some credit to the Bulldog who got that interception. Name escapes me right at the moment, but anyway, that just turned into a big moment for them and kind of tied a ball game up. And so that's how pretty much South Carolina State reacted. I mean, FAMU jumped out to the lead. South Carolina State tied it. FAMU jumped out to a lead again in the second quarter, and then South Carolina State tied it. So there were definitely those moments. Well, let me correct that. Actually, South Carolina State did cut the deficit to 14. Actually, took the lead 14-7 on the block punt, and then FAMU answered. So just a correction on that. So, okay, the time of possession, one final thing before we move into the second half, AD. Time of possession, we talked about a dominating performance by FAMU. Time of possession in the first half, 20 minutes, 20 seconds for FAMU, 9 minutes for South Carolina State. The defense essentially neutralized. They neutered Tyrese Nick. I mean, this is Tyrese Nick, the quarterback for South Carolina State, came into the ball game. He threw 5 touchdowns the week before. We were spotlighting him, thinking, okay, this might be a matchup between two conference player of the year candidates, Nick and Stanley. And Nick was basically made, I use the word neutered, but basically FAMU had him bottled up, and they really confused the heck out of him defensively, and they got to him as often as they could. And great defensive game for both teams, especially against the run. So moving into the third quarter, that's where FAMU would start to separate a little bit. On their first drive of the quarter, Xavier Smith would connect with Ryan Stanley with 12:30 remaining in the third quarter. They'd go up 21-14. Then on the next drive by FAMU, they would pick up a touchdown thanks to Terrell Jennings, but it was really set up by a big pass play from Stanley to Azende Ray. And at that point, the Rattlers were up 2 touchdowns, 28-14. And the only points in that quarter for South Carolina State would really be a field goal with 3:29 to play, 28-17. And again, AD, here we are going into the fourth quarter. FAMU with a 28-17 lead, and they're driving. And this game looks like it's about to be put to bed at this point in the game. And then I think going into the fourth quarter, the play that really flipped momentum is with 11:32 to play. The Rattlers are driving, and this comes after an interception by Tyrese Nick. The Rattlers are driving, and they're essentially in the red zone again, and Stanley makes a bad read, throws an interception in the end zone with 11:32, and that play right there, AD, would have put FAMU up by 17 points, and you could just tell the way that game was going up to that point that South Carolina State's spirit was just crushed. Your thoughts at that point in the ball game?
Yeah, I mean, you're correct. FAMU scores that touchdown right there to open up the fourth quarter, and you can go ahead and start the tailgate after the game, and because this game is essentially over with at that point. But we've mentioned it before. Ryan Stanley has the ability or the inability, I don't know which way we want to do it, but we know he can be interception prone, and he could go 2, 3, 4 games without throwing a pick. But when he gets to throwing picks, it seems like they come in bunches. We thought they were going to come last week in the game versus North Carolina Central, but it seems like he held them for this week, and the South Carolina Bulldogs defense did a great job picking Stanley off a couple of times in this particular matchup. If you're a Rattler fan, let's hope he's gone through this bad streak that we know he goes through at some point in time every year and gotten those interceptions out of his system.
Yeah, definitely. Stanley just some bad fortune with his interceptions. They just seem, they're not just normal interceptions that just happen in the middle of the field. They seem to just be momentum changers that just kind of lead to opportunities for the opponent. And so with this interception, South Carolina State, Coach Buddy Pugh, looking to change up just something, take advantage of the momentum, and he makes the change at quarterback. He goes from Tyrese Nick, goes away from him, and inserts Corey Fields into the ball game. And Fields had started some games last year for South Carolina State, and so in comes Fields with on this ensuing drive after the interception. And I mean, it was like you can't put into words when you see the change in the momentum that happened after the interception. Fields just comes in, and all of a sudden he starts lasering passes. I mean, Tyrese Nick really couldn't find his receivers. I mean, give credit to the FAMU defense and the secondary. But all of a sudden, Corey Fields just started picking the defense apart as he marched right down the field with 10-15 to play. In 4 or 5 plays, he put South Carolina State in the end zone, and now it's a 28-24 ball game at that point in the game. FAMU would actually, have a nice drive, and Bishop Bonnet would score a touchdown that would help FAMU go up 35-24 with 4:53 to play in the game. And I think ADers, a lot of folks were thinking, okay, we just put the lead back up to double digits. Out comes Corey Fields again in that South Carolina State offense, and boom, 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 5 or 6 passes, and he had actually at one point in the ball game completed 8 consecutive passes and marched the Bulldogs right back down the field, throws another touchdown pass, and the game is 35-30 at this point with 3:42 left to play. And so you could sense the momentum change. I mean, we went from a tough ball game to all of a sudden we've had 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, and it wouldn't be over, AD. It would not be over because FAMU on the next possession would go 3 and out, and the punt unit would come out, and what do you know, with 2:18 to play, the second block punt of the day, and it just so happened to be the second block punt by Terrence McCray, would actually again find its way into the end zone. South Carolina State recovers, and my goodness, the unthinkable has happened. The Bulldogs, who were at one point down 28-17, now are leading 36-35. They would convert the 2-point conversion to make it 38-35. But something significant happened there on that touchdown celebration, AD. Care to talk about it?
South Carolina State was a little bit too excited. First of all, something that happened on that play, that's when I sent out that text saying, "Fam, you done gave the game away." That's what happened. But as far as on the field, because of the big momentum of the play and the block 6 is what you would call that on their block punt, Brian, the whole South Carolina State team ran onto the field to celebrate. What is the significance of that? 2 things was significant of that. Number one, that's a 15-yard penalty. So South Carolina State was now kicking off from the 20-yard line. That's right. Number one. Number two, there was a player who was ejected because of the unsportsmanlike. I do not have that player's name in front of me, but because he had received an unsportsmanlike earlier in the game, and now because of the unsportsmanlike against the entire team, that counted as his second unsportsmanlike penalty of the game. which caused the ejection. Not only that, but he also, according to rule, has to sit out the first half of the next game. Too unsportsmanlike in one game. If it occurs in the second half, you have to sit out the first half of the next game. So, what was significant about them kicking off at the 20-yard line, Brian? The ball went out. The kickoff went out of bounds. Not only was it a short kick, but the kickoff went out of bounds. So FAMU gains the ball after everything has gone wrong on their own 50-yard line after the 5-yard penalty for the kickoff out of bounds.
Yeah, definitely. And on the 50, that was amazing seeing that turn the way it did.
So now you set Ryan Stanley up, who, in essence, the team has lost the momentum. Now you've given them a breath of life. You've given them an opportunity. First of all, they've only got to go 20, 25 yards just to get in the field goal range to possibly tie this game up. After they get to that point, now they can relax and play for the victory. And that's exactly what happened in that game, Brian.
Yeah, and there was a significant injury to Bishop Bonnet on the possession, but the possession in which FAMU's punt got blocked, Bishop Bonnet had got hurt, lower leg injury a couple of plays before that. Really, I think it was on first down. So they go out into this drive without Bonnet, and he had a good rushing day at that point. But I made mention of this in the conversation with Coach Simmons that the young freshman, Devon Kendrick, one of the biggest plays I thought of the game in that drive was on first down. He picks up an 11-yard run, and essentially he gets hit probably about 2 yards into the run, sheds the tackle, and ends up picking up the extra 8 to 9, and all of a sudden now FAMU is moving. And a couple of plays later, there was a couple of passes that were kind of almost intercepted or almost deflected, yielding an interception, but they didn't quite turn out. South Carolina State didn't get the bounce off the deflection. And then once again, Stanley hits Kendrick literally on a 2-yard pass, ends up turning into an 18-yard run up the sideline for Kendrick. And just like that, the young man had accounted for 39 yards at that point in the ball game on this drive in 2 plays, and FAMU is now all of a sudden inside the 20-yard line, and that's when Ryan Stanley would find his tight end, Kamari Young, over the middle. Found him right at about the 2-yard line. Kamari Young's a big guy. He's a tight end. He would push his way into the end zone, and with 1:09 to play, FAMU would grab the lead 42-28 after the PAT. And essentially the FAMU defense would shut down. They finally adjusted to Corey Fields, and on the final possession, essentially gave up nothing over the top. The defense adjusted and knocked in 4 consecutive incompletions by Corey Fields, and that was it. South Carolina State off the field. FAMU comes away with the win. An unbelievable, I guess 35 points were scored in the fourth quarter, and as I mentioned to Coach Simmons and talking with him, a game that almost became a game in which the headline was, mistakes by FAMU lead to Bulldogs win. The game gets flipped to, Rattlers come back and rally to beat South Carolina State, or you could say, Rattlers finish what they started against South Carolina State. It was an amazing turn of events that fourth quarter, and definitely an instant classic. Your final thoughts on that game, AD?
Brian, it's really interesting to see, and I'm gonna have to go back and watch this fourth quarter from earlier this year, whether the Alcorn, I believe that was Alcorn Prairie View A&M fourth quarter, or this FAMU South Carolina State fourth quarter was the more impressive fourth quarter of the year thus far, Brian.
I'm glad you brought that up because I was trying to recall what other game this season where we had a fourth quarter like that, and thank you for bringing that up. That was a dramatic win, and definitely one of those games that I've already kind of tabbed that as a potential game of the year nominee, right along that game between Prairie View and Alcorn State. Just some final thoughts and numbers. Ryan Stanley finished with, I believe the total was 427 yards. It was his career high in passing yards. He had 3 touchdowns. Of course, he did have the 2 interceptions. But most importantly, I think the Rattlers threw the ball something like 49 times in the game. The running game, wasn't completely there, and you could probably definitely give credit to South Carolina State for that. And their running game wasn't in place, and give credit to FAMU's defense. I thought both defenses did a great job in the contest. And you hear some of that. If you definitely I'd encourage you to listen to the interview I did with Coach Simmons. And we got a chance to talk about all the facets of this game. And it was a big win to just sort of get the monkey off the Rattlers' back. I mean, winning in Orangeburg, South Carolina has not been easy in the Buddy Pugh era. And, that's one of Coach Simmons' mentors. So it's just a lot of emotions and a big win. And, of course, it was Coach Simmons' birthday. So just all kinds of positive synergy for FAMU in that game. And now the Rattlers get ready to move on to North Carolina A&T, who were off this upcoming week. So I'm sure that they were watching this game intently, trying to figure out how they were going to deal with FAMU. And so, speaking of the MEAC, I wanted to bring up AD a game, another contender in the MEAC, Bethune-Cookman. Now, Bethune-Cookman technically played on Thursday. They had the first game of the week, and, they took on North Carolina Central, who just had finished up with a game against Florida A&M. And, this one, just kind of going through some of the notes on this game, it was pretty much all Bethune-Cookman from the outset. The Wildcats are now 6-0 lifetime in Durham, and they are 5-1 overall for the first time since 2015. And the North Carolina Central actually drops down to 2-5, 1-2 in the conference. Jimmy Robinson and Akevius Williams once again would be the main role players in this victory for Bethune, as they each scored 2 touchdowns. And now Bethune-Cookman has won 4 straight ball games. They are unbeaten in the MEAC, unbeaten in FBS, or FCS, and had a nice win on Thursday. So, AD, it kind of sets up for, if you think about, obviously Bethune was, in our poll, they're ranked number 3 in our poll. South Carolina State was 4. FAMU was 5. And all of those teams coming into this game, of course, A&T is number 1. And so now, the sort of the shift moves to the North Carolina A&T Florida A&M game. And just how do you handicap this race at this point in the season, where we've got 3 teams that are unbeaten against non-Division I teams, and the South Carolina State have an outside shot still to win the conference?
Yes, South Carolina State still has a shot if they take care of their own business, because South Carolina State has the opportunity to beat everybody else, except for Florida A&M, because they still have them remaining on the schedule. A&T still remains on their schedule, and Bethune still remains on their schedule. So yes, the Bulldogs, South Carolina State, does have an opportunity to win. Of course, they're gonna need a FAMU loss, but FAMU cannot win the conference. So it's still South Carolina State still has the opportunity to handle their own business. They control their own destiny.
Right, and when you say FAMU can't win the conference, obviously what you're referring to is the fact that FAMU has self-imposed sanctions that, as far as the conference is concerned, makes them ineligible to win the conference. But the crazy part is these losses to FAMU still count against you. So you best believe if FAMU finishes first or even tied for first in the conference, somebody will be doling out some championship rings and hanging a championship banner somewhere. I firmly believe that.
And they'll be handed out a piece of paper also, because they will be considered the paper champions for the year.
Yeah, well, look, if they run the record of unbeaten all the way through, they will make a strong claim for Black College National Champions. It'll be interesting to see what the season, how the season unfolds. The Rattlers right now with the 5-game winning streak have the longest winning streak in Black College football. They're 5-1 overall, 3-0 in the conference. Bethune-Cookman also 5-1, 3-0 in the conference. A&T was off last week, so they're only 4-1 overall, but they're 2-0 in the conference. They're on a 3-game winning streak, which sort of sits behind Bethune and their 4-game win streak. And then that's where now you have South Carolina State, who are 3-2, 1-1 overall. North Carolina Central 2-5, 1-2 overall. Norfolk State with a big win against Howard, 49-21. Norfolk State is now 2-5, 1-2 in the conference. Howard drops to 1-6, 1-2 overall. Morgan picks up a win. Morgan picked up a win over Delaware State, and so Morgan gets their first win of the season, which moves them to 1-5 in the conference, 1-2 overall. And then Delaware State, they do have a win under their belt. They've lost 4 games in a row, though. 1-5 and 0-4. So that's
one thing, Brian. Though everybody's so focused on those top 4 teams in the conference. These 4 teams need to watch those other 5 teams, because it's going to be one of those other 5 teams that's going to play spoiler and give one of these top 4 teams a loss that is not anticipated. You expect these top 4 teams to beat up on each other, and you expect them to take care of business against these the other 5 teams. But one of these other 5 teams, just like it has happened the last couple of years, is going to get their surprising victory. I don't know who it's going to be.
Well, look. You said that. I was going to make you answer the question. I was going to say, who do you think that is?
I would give you Central just because their defense can create so many turnovers, and turnovers is something that you cannot account for when you predict these games. Central is good for getting a pick 6 or a timely interception to turn the momentum of the game. This is the first game this year, the game against Bethune, where Central's defense did not get an interception. So, with a defense that good and that creates turnovers like that, that could be the team that can sneak up on somebody and just have one of those days where they get, 3 interceptions. One of them is a pick 6 and a fumble recovery or something along those lines. And even though a team may dominate them statistically for 400 yards, they'll create 14 to 21 points just based on their defense.
See, it's interesting you said North Carolina Central, who have losses against Bethune and FAMU this year. They still haven't played A&T. Obviously, that'll be the last game of the regular season, and they still have to play South Carolina State. I was gonna say look out for Norfolk State. Norfolk State, of course. Yeah, they lost obviously to North Carolina A&T pretty badly, 58-19. But they were in a close game against FAMU. You could think maybe that game was a bit of a hangover. I don't know about that. I don't think that game. I watched that game. That game, I don't think they were ever. They, meaning FAMU, I don't think they were ever in jeopardy. And the score was closer than really the outcome. I mean, that was a very late touchdown by Norfolk State to make that a 2-point ball game. Really, that should have been a 9-point victory for FAMU. But Norfolk State has the offense and they have the quarterbacking that, they still, they could possibly create some trouble for maybe a South Carolina State or Bethune if things work out. Among the bottom four, Howard, Morgan State, Del State, I guess bottom three, I should say. Morgan State is the team that has, I think, the defensive group that they could keep a game close and possibly turn a victory if, some strange occurrences happen. And so that's among the bottom three, I think those are the teams that you got to kind of watch out for possibly. Let's do this, AD. Let's take a quick timeout, and when we come back, we'll talk about some of our other games from the past weekend, give you some more current standings and things of that, and we will keep this thing going. You are listening to the BCSN Sports Wrap as we wrap up week number 7 in the Black college football scene. We'll be back right after these words.
Majesty is a premium health and wellness tea line focused on bringing delicious yet healthy tea blends to the community. Filled with an abundance of vitamins and antioxidants, we work to blend teas with exotic spices and fruits to produce scrumptious and wholesome beverages. So check us out at mymajesties.com. That's MyMajesties.com. My Majesties, an Urban Passport member.
The Creole seasoning is a sodium-free and sugar-free blend that's versatile enough to put on anything. One of the first blends I developed more than 8 years ago, the Creole seasoning has an unmistakable aroma, a bold flavor, and a little heat for character. Every time I open one of these bottles, I hear trumpets and big band music.
The Black College Sports Network is proud to partner with ComputerRatings.com. That's COMPUGHTER ratings.com for the upcoming college football season. ComputerRatings.com delivers rankings, game predictions, and statistics for hundreds of professional and collegiate teams. The key feature of ComputerRatings.com is the Versus Sports Simulator, which allows users to simulate any possible matchup and view the predicted scores along with a side-by-side stats analysis. Improve your odds by signing up for a subscription. Monthly, semi-yearly, and yearly subscriptions are available. For our listeners and viewers, use the promo code BCSN19 and get 15% off of your subscription at checkout. Visit www.computerratings.com. That's COMPUGHTER ratings.com.
Welcome back to the BCSN Sports Wrap. Brian Fulford and AD Drew here, wrapping up week number 7 of the Black college football scene. And we're going to move over to the Southwestern Athletic Conference, the SWAC, and one of our spotlight games, the Alcorn State Braves hosting homecoming against Savannah State. And it would actually be the aerial attack for Alcorn State that would actually yield the victory here, as they would pull out a victory over Savannah State by a score of 42-17. And the young man Felix Harper, I don't even know what to call him. I don't even want to call him a super sub anymore, because he is, I believe he is now 5 games into his career. And he is just, coming into this game, I think he had 13 touchdowns, no interceptions or something like that, maybe 2 interceptions. But again, he had another big day. He was 16 of 21, no interceptions. I believe he threw for 4 touchdown passes in this ball game, if I'm not mistaken.
5 touchdowns.
5 touchdowns. Okay, thank you for correcting me. 5 touchdowns in the ball game. I wonder, that would put him at a total, if I'm not mistaken, of 18 touchdowns. And no, I'm looking at it here. Since taking over as a starter in the last 4 games, he's thrown for 1,146 yards, 16 touchdowns, and no interceptions. I think if he threw an interception, it was in the first game where he came in relief. But since he's been the starter, he's 4-0. 1,146 yards, 16 touchdowns, as I just said. Is it possible, AD, that it's very likely that Felix Harper could be in the running for SWAC Offensive Player of the Year?
It sounds like a Ahmad Raymond story part 2. Last year,
yeah.
Tuskegee quarterback who came off the bench and came out of nowhere and wound up being league MVP.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I have not, there's been no indication of when, we haven't heard any indication of when Noah Johnson will be coming back. It makes for an interesting dilemma. I wouldn't necessarily go so far and call it a controversy because we'll have to wait for that to happen. But Felix Harper is playing really well right now, and it just I can't say enough good things about what's happening for Alcorn State when you can go to the backup quarterback and he can have the kind of success that your starter or that you expected from your starter and your All-American starter in that, Noah Johnson. Moving over to another. Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
Would it not be interesting if he was the one not only to lead them to a conference championship, but a Celebration Bowl championship?
Wow. Wow. That would be something, wouldn't it? We're a long way from there, but right now I don't see there's not too many more challengers left in Alcorn State's path. I mean, they still have to play Alabama A&M, and I think that'll be the game that a lot of people have circled, because they have beaten Alabama State. And so they beat Mississippi Valley State on their side. So, yeah, they just really have to deal with Alabama A&M. And that'll be – they've, handled Prairie View A&M. So it's set up for them. And that'll be a game down the road that we'll definitely be looking at. Let's move over to another game, AD, that bit of a shocker, I got to admit. Grambling State hosting Alabama A&M. And the Bulldogs, who came into this ball game with a record of 4-2, 1-0 in conference, and a bit of a throwback night. I don't know if you saw the visuals from this game, AD, but Grambling kind of went old school with the old Eddie Robinson style uniforms, which you're familiar with. Grambling's uniforms, you think of them primarily as black and gold, but they have a little bit of red in them. And they went back to the old uniform style. I even saw pictures of Coach Fobbs in the suit jacket and red tie. Oh, yeah, for a second, I thought Eddie Robinson was on the sideline. I had to kind of do a double take at the pictures that I saw. But all that said, AD, Grambling who got their first win of the season in a big way against Jackson State, comes up with the second win against Alabama A&M, 23-10. Pretty outstanding streak Grambling's got going on. I mean, are we at a point, AD, where we need to start paying attention to Grambling State? Have they finally figured it out?
Brian, we're going to have to sit another week or two before we start jumping to those conclusions.
Okay, that's fair. On the on the Alabama A&M side, I do have to mention that Grambling did a good job of keeping Akil Glass in check. They held him to 186 passing yards. He did have 2 touchdowns, threw 2 interceptions on 19 of 13 passing. Jordan Bentley for Alabama A&M, who I've said it before, he may not have the numbers that guys like Jermaine Martin are throwing up and a few other guys, but Jordan Bentley is the most consistent 100-plus yard runner in black college football. He had his 5th in 7 games, his 5th 100-plus rushing yard game as he rushed for 137 yards on 17 carries. And Jordan Bentley really is moving up the national ranks, and really should be considered one of the top backs in the conference. And then of course, AD, while all the other games of the day were pretty much kicking off between 1 and 3 p.m. Eastern time, we had one late night game, and that was Prairie View A&M taking on Southern University. And, this game kind of thought it might be the premier matchup of the night, but it would turn out that Southern would be in control of this ball game, and Southern would end up finding themselves on the winning side of this game against Prairie View with a final score of 34-28. Your thoughts on Southern and Prairie View A&M?
Well, I did get a chance to watch a lot of this game also, Brian, and the game was pretty much in Southern's control, although you knew Prairie View had an opportunity to not only come back in this game, but to win this game, because Southern just could never put Prairie View away. Prairie View found a way to hang around. The defense was able to keep them in this particular game, which is kind of strange saying Prairie View, because they're pretty much known for their offense being their lifeblood, but their defense really kept them in this game and gave them an opportunity to try to come back and win this game. But Southern was able to hold them off and hold on for the victory.
Yeah, so an impressive win for Southern, and it really, sadly, I once again, I may be faced with with failing to pick the correct team out of the SWAC West, as now Prairie View sits with 2 losses in conference, having lost to Alcorn State and having lost to Southern, and they still haven't played UAPB, still haven't played Grambling yet. So those are 2 games still facing Prairie View, who overall with a record of 2-4 and 2-2 are sitting in the middle of the pack in the Western Division. Southern now is sitting square at the top of the Western Division, 2-0 in conference, and winners of 2 in a row, and 3-3 overall in the season. And Southern, once again, seems to, after struggling early, seems to find themselves, and then they start playing some good ball. A few other scores from the SWAC before we kind of just mention the standings overall again. Arkansas Pine Bluff gets a 38-6 win over Mississippi Valley State in that contest. Then we also had Jackson State losing homecoming to Alabama State 31-16. So that was a disappointing loss for them. But probably a more disappointing loss was by Texas Southern, who lost their homecoming to Division II Missouri S&T. So 2 disappointing homecoming losses there. I don't know if one is worse than the other when you lose homecoming. I think it just is what it is. But definitely losing to –
when you're FCS and you lose to a D2 opponent for homecoming, that's a worse loss.
All right, well said, well said. So the standings once again in the East, you have Alcorn in first place at 3-0 in the conference. Alabama State is 2-1 in second place. You have the Bulldogs of Alabama A&M at 1-1, and Jackson State, only with a 0-1 record, just sits above Mississippi Valley State, who is 0-2 overall. And then over on the western side, as mentioned previously, Southern is 2-0. UAPB with a 2-1 mark, sitting in second. Prairie View A&M at 2-2. Grambling still that, even though that was a win for Grambling, I believe it was still it was a game that did not count towards the standings. So unfortunately for Grambling, they're still 0-2 in conference, despite being 2-4 overall. And then Texas Southern sitting at 0-2 and winless at 0-6. UAPB and Alcorn State with the best overall records of every team in the SWAC, with a 5-2 mark at this point in the season. Moving over to the SIAC, AD, and we'll start with that game, that the 84th meeting between Tuskegee and Morehouse. And, of course, we can't forget last year's outstanding game, went triple overtime. And it was just, we didn't know. I mean, overall, this series has been dominated by Tuskegee, having won over 75% of the games, having won 20 of the last 25. And, I guess it's Tuskegee. And, things just kind of get back on the right track when you kind of play Morehouse.
The University is back to normal. Tuskegee has beaten Morehouse.
Yes, sir, by a score of 21-10. Tuskegee gets the win over Morehouse. I'll turn it over to you and let you beam for a few seconds on the big victory for Tuskegee over Morehouse.
Well, Tuskegee ends their 3-game losing streak as they defeat Morehouse 21-10. This game, Tuskegee opened the game up, 6-7 yard play. Looks like, I don't know what's going on with the quarterback situation at Tuskegee. You got Amon Ramus one game. You've got, they're just going back and forth with the quarterback situation. So I guess the Ramus is the musical quarterback for this particular game. But Morehouse quickly came back to answer with a touchdown. So, but the big thing is the Tuskegee defense came to play in this particular game, shutting down that those running backs from Morehouse. Whatever you think about Morehouse, you think about quarterback Michael Sims, you think about Santo Dunn, and the rest of those running backs getting the ball in space, and Tuskegee apparently did a good job shutting those down. This victory raises Tuskegee's record. Can you call it a rivalry when you've got a record of 73, 28, and 7? And the winners of 21 of the last 25, can you really call that a rivalry, Brian?
Is it 21 or 25 now? Because, did it kind of moved, because it was 20 or 25 going into the game. So now, when you move forward a date, it now becomes 21 or 25, huh?
Yeah. That means they won the other one at the start of that 25-year streak. But, 26-year streaks just don't sound good. We go keep it at 25. And full disclosure, I am a Tuskegee alum also. Which is why
I think anyone who's listening can kind of catch that.
Which is why I throw the we out accidentally sometimes. In the game, Michael Sims had 141 yards passing, 16 yards rushing. And Bailey led Morehouse with 99 yards rushing. For Tuskegee, Duramus was 12 of 17 for 137 yards, but he did throw 2 touchdowns.
All right. Enough, Aiden. You're glowing. I can see you glowing through the phone, through the line here. Your Tuskegee, good win for Tuskegee, moves their record to now 2-4 and 1-1 in the conference, and Morehouse drops to 2-4, 0-1 in the conference. Tough loss for Morehouse after the exciting win the week before against Kentucky State. Moving over to the defending SIAC champs, Miles College Golden Bears, who coming off of the craziness of the previous week against Clark for their homecoming. Now they get to come and play Benedict. They play homecoming spoiler for Benedict, who's looking for their first win of the season. And essentially, AD, this game would go back and forth from the first score of the game. There would be 6 lead changes in this contest throughout the game. So it is one of those classic games where you score, then I score and take the lead. You score, you take the lead. I score and take the lead back. And it would just kind of go like that all the way to the end of the ball game. And Miles would end up getting the victory with a touchdown run by Padarius Martin, I believe, with about 19 seconds left on the clock, under a minute definitely. And we actually, another supplement that you can listen to from this past weekend, I had the chance to talk to Coach Reginald Ruffin. And look, this Miles team is just finding ways to win. It's not pretty. It's not as pretty as it was earlier in the season. I think they've hit that point where they're looking for some consistency from the quarterback play, but the running backs are doing their job, and more importantly, the defense is showing when they need to show up. And right now, it's just a nice little recipe for success for Miles, who, they've had to come back to win now, or have been in 2 very competitive ball games back to back against teams that maybe you might think that they should be blowing out. But, look, there's no secrets among these teams, and circumstances are what they are, and a win is a win. So what are your thoughts, AD, on Miles getting this win and over Benedict?
I think the experience of 2018 has played a real big factor on these close games in 2019. But you consider last week's game and then this week's game, them giving away, 3 games last year early in the season before they were able to get the formula right and win those close games down the stretch last year. They've gotten to the point where not us, not me, not this year, and they just seems like they're just willing themselves to victory if the game is close. If you're going to beat Miles, you're going to have to beat them by 3-4 touchdowns. If it comes down to a 1-possession game, you have to put your money on Miles right now, Brian.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think right now Miles they're finding ways to win. I mean, you got to be willing to play a perfect ball game, a clean ball game, and again, the sad part is circumstances are what they are, because Clark had probably played at their best game of the year prior to the weather delay in the late third quarter. And when you come out of that weather delay, it's a whole new game at that point. And for one quarter and 1 minute, Miles ended up being the better team than Clark, and Clark ended up losing a game that as I said, circumstances, they probably would have won that game if they were just slightly different. Miles 5-1 currently on the season, 2-0 in conference play. And Benedict still looking for win number 1 as they are 0-5.
Yeah,
go ahead.
This is a game you would have touted as a preview of the conference championship game.
Benedict and Miles.
Yes, as a possible.
Yeah, both teams had.
Game.
Yeah, both teams were receiving votes. Benedict was definitely one of 3 teams that were receiving votes in the Eastern Division. Them along with Morehouse, and it just hasn't worked out for either of those teams thus far. Albany State is, they're out in front. I'm not going to say they've shut the door on everybody, but they're out in front, leading the race. And then, Miles was one of 3 teams down on the western side. So, I don't see that matchup happening. But yeah, at the beginning of the year, we thought it might happen.
Right.
Moving on.
So I don't know what's happening in Columbia, South Carolina, but they need to get it figured out.
Yeah, definitely. Moving over to another game, homecoming for Central State, as Central State took on Fort Valley State. And there are very few times when you get games where you can look up at the scoreboard and you can say, am I reading that right? Did they really just do that? And this was one of those games. Fort Valley State would put up, count them, 77 points on the scoreboard. Central State would put up 34, and needless to say, we end up with a game with 111 points, by far the most points of any game we've had this year. I think the closest thus far was the Jackson State-Tennessee State game that was 49-44. So among 2 teams, you end up with 111 points. And, I mean, there's too many stats to unfold in this little short period of time, but there is definitely maybe 1 or 2 performances, AD, that you can pull out from this game and spotlight.
First of all, normally when you score 34 points on homecoming, you're normally the victor. So normally, but what the heck happened to your defense? 77 points. Slade Jarman, 386 yards on. Listen to this, Brian. 33 of 48. 48 attempts. Get that man some ice for his arm. 48 attempts. He also ran.
It wasn't even. You know what's funny? What's funny about 48? It wasn't even the high mark of the weekend. It was close, but it wasn't the high mark of the weekend.
It was not. But wow. That's just amazing right there. He was able to have those type of numbers. Running back Terrell Southall, a career high 235 yards in a loss. That's and 235 yards, and his team loses by 40 points. Those are numbers that are just kind of hard to fathom, Brian. There's no other way to put it.
Yeah, I was trying to look up where Saffold was coming into this ball game because I noted it. Saffold came in with, bear with me here just a second as I try to find it. Yeah, Saffold came into the ball game leading, I believe. Let me find him here. Quick second here. This is great for the podcast here. Saffold. Yes. Okay. He was first in Division II in all-purpose yards. That's what I was looking for. So he's first in Division II coming into this game in all-purpose yards. And so now you've added 235 on top of, what he's done. It'll be interesting to see where those numbers fall because, of course, Saffold is not just a running back. He's also, special teams, a kickoff and punt returner as well. So it'll be interesting. But, Slade,
he had just over 1,000 yards 1,000 all-purpose yards, averaging 202 yards per game.
Right. And Slade Jarman, look, has finally started to – I was really high on him at the beginning of the season. I think he had a little rocky start, but now Fort Valley State is on a bit of a winning streak here. I believe they are even on a 4-game winning streak, if I'm not mistaken. They are now 4-2 overall, 1-0 in conference. I'm not really sure. Yep, 1-0 in conference. I'm looking at the SIAC page. Although I thought they lost to Albany State at the beginning of the year. So I'm not really sure.
No, they haven't played Albany State yet. Albany State is the Whitewater Classic. That's in about 3 weeks, Brian.
I'm trying to think, well, who did they lose to at the beginning of the year? Fort Valley State. Anyway, it was Miles. They lost to Miles at the beginning of the year. That's what it was. Okay, right. Yeah, and so that one didn't count, obviously, towards the records. So Fort Valley State is still in play. That Whitewater Classic there between Albany State might be a deciding game for both teams in terms of who wins the SIAC East Division. So that'll be interesting to see how it plays out for them. Let's see if I can find if there are any other scores here. Definitely want to mention Albany State on homecoming, picking up a 33-13 win over Lane. Also on homecoming, you had Kentucky State with a 35-24 win. Kentucky State, just so happens, that is their first win against a non-FCS team, against a non-Division I team. So they are now 3-2 overall. So here are the standings, AD, in the SIAC. In the East, you've got Albany State at 3-0. Savannah State listed at 2-0, although we are aware Savannah State is not really eligible to get to the SIAC championship this season. Fort Valley State 1-0, and so they round out the only unbeaten teams on that side. And then Morehouse, Clark Atlanta, and Benedict round out the east side of the conference. Over in the west, Miles at 2-0, Central State with a 1-0 mark in conference play, followed up by Tuskegee and Kentucky State with a 1-1 overall record, and Lane at 0-2. Any thoughts on those standings as you think about the race coming down the stretch, AD? Any thoughts on the SIAC?
Just let the SIAC play out with this crazy one game. It counts for an Eastern team, but doesn't count for a Western team, or these games count for a Western team, but don't count for Eastern team. Let's just get to November and figure out who's the champion, because it's going to be too hard to keep up with two teams playing each other where the game counts for one and doesn't count for the other one with the SIAC.
All right, well said. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll get into the CIAA as well as some of the independents. We'll talk about Edward Waters getting their first win of the season, and AD's favorite team, and slowly becoming mine as well, West Virginia State. We'll talk about them in just a moment. We come back from this quick timeout. Thanks for listening to the BCSN Sports Wrap. We'll be back in just a moment.
Let's face it, shopping for insurance can be time-consuming. That's why when it comes to your auto, home, and life insurance needs, make things simple and trust the experts at Allstate. They will help you get the coverage that fits your needs while helping you bundle your life, home, and auto policies. Bundling saves you money, sure, but it also saves you time, so you can enjoy the things that matter most even more. Contact me, Tammy Haynes, your local agent, for a free personalized insurance quote. Allstate, are you in good hands?
The Black College Sports Network is proud to partner with ComputerRatings.com. That's COMPUGHTER ratings.com for the upcoming college football season. ComputerRatings.com delivers rankings, game predictions, and statistics for hundreds of professional and collegiate teams. The key feature of ComputerRatings.com is the Versus Sports Simulator, which allows users to simulate any possible matchup and view the predicted scores along with a side-by-side stats analysis. Improve your odds by signing up for a subscription. Monthly, semi-yearly, and yearly subscriptions are available. For our listeners and viewers, use the promo code BCSN19 and get 15% off of your subscription at checkout. Visit www.computerratings.com. That's COMPUGHTER ratings.com.
The Creole seasoning is a sodium-free and sugar-free blend that's versatile enough to put on anything. One of the first blends I developed more than 8 years ago, the Creole seasoning has an unmistakable aroma, a bold flavor, and a little heat for character. Every time I open one of these bottles, I hear trumpets and big band music.
It's like a loop machine. All around town, people trying to get down.
Welcome back to the BCSN Sports Wrap. AD Drew, that's him. AD, say hi to the people.
Hi, people.
I'm Brian Fulford. You can follow us on Twitter. You can find AD at BCSN Drew, DREW. You can find me at DRB365, and we want to encourage you to follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at MyBCSN1, the number one, and, of course, also try to find us on Facebook as well. Look for the Black College Sports Network and or find the BCSN Sports Wrap. All right, AD, let's move over to the CIAA, and we're going to start with our number one ranked team in the under D1 category, and in our top five under D1, that's the Bowie State Bulldogs taking on Shawan for homecoming, hosting the Hawks. Needless to say, this was a premier matchup a year ago, a game that Shawan ended up winning. So this time coming into Bowie's home stadium, there was definitely payback on the minds of the Bulldogs, and they just took a big bite out of the Hawks in this contest with a score of 64-17. I mean, that is a homecoming thrashing. And Mr. Jerome Johnson, he was not the quarterback, or he was not the name that we thought would be the heir apparent to Amir Hall, but he has cemented himself, I think, as the man to lead this team to possibly a second CIAA championship. Your thoughts on this contest and the performance of Mr. Johnson?
First of all, we're going to start off with Bryce Witt, who 13 for 24, 136 yards, 3 INTs. But Witt became the all-time passing leader in Chawan history during the fourth quarter of this game. So kudos to Mr. Bryce Witt. And I believe he still has one more year of eligibility for the Hawks.
Yes, he does.
Yeah, so he's just gonna pile on the statistics for Chawan. Number 2, 569 yards of total offense, led by Mr. Jerome Johnson, who accounted for 6 touchdowns in this particular game, Brian. 3 passing, 3 on the ground.
We've seen some impressive performances now. Johnson in those 6 touchdowns. We've seen Felix Harper with a 6 touchdown performance. We've seen Slade Jarman, I think, with a 6 touchdown performance. And of course, nobody has topped Bryce Witt in his 7 touchdown performance yet. Mentioned it earlier. Jerome Johnson is the quarterback of choice at Bowie State. I mean, there should not be, not that there are or were this past weekend, but he's the man. And I think you got to ride that horse until it bucks off its jockey, because right now Johnson is not only rushing, but he's adding that second dimension that that I think is really separating Bowie State. And the defense continues its stellar play, which going into this game, AD, you look at, this is what we was wondering. We were wondering whether Shawan and their highly rated offense, how would they do against Bowie State's highly rated defense? And, 64-17 says it all. And the fact that Bowie put up 64, they were the second or third rated offense in most of these categories. And I think it was an elimination game for Shawan. And, I had expectations of a better showing from them in the North Division. But at this point, they still have matchups against Virginia State and Virginia Union. And I don't see it this year. Defensively, they just aren't good enough. So I think it'll be interesting to kind of see where it goes from here for them. Over on the south side, moving over to the south side, Fayetteville State would find themselves in a tough ball game against Shaw. Shaw's been playing everybody close. I mean, Shaw has really had some really good games, some close games. Of course, we can recall that they came really close to beating Bowie. Had it not been for a couple of blocked punts, they go to double overtime or go to overtime against Shawan and pull out a victory. And against Fayetteville State, it was close. Fayetteville would wind up with a 25-22 victory. As once again, Shaw got out to a good lead, a 14-3 lead in this contest, but unfortunately that lead would fall apart as Fayetteville would find ways to get some great quarterbacking, actually some great running in this contest. AD, what are your thoughts? You got a thing or two from this contest that caught your eye?
Fayetteville 4-4 in the red zone in this particular game. So red zone opportunities are a premium, especially in this conference, and to go 4-4 in red zone opportunities it is a plus. You mentioned Bowie and Shawan in the previous game. These two teams right here are also in the top in most offensive categories in the CIAA, Big Shaw and Fayetteville. So these are the four teams that are in the in most statistical categories in the CIAA. So, but down here in the South, it's going to come down to Fayetteville and Livingstone. So with Fayetteville probably being the front runner to win the South, once again, set it up a matchup between them and who knows in the North, because all three of those teams can beat anybody on any one of the other three on any given day. And I'm talking about the two Virginia schools, Virginia Union, Virginia State, along with Bowie.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Virginia Union ended up with a 62-0 win against Lincoln, PA. A bad scheduling matchup there for Lincoln, PA on homecoming. And send that memo out to somebody else.
Whose homecoming was that again, Brian?
It was Lincoln University.
Okay.
So,
and they lost. What was the score again?
62-0. 62-0.
Yeah. Note to self. Don't schedule Virginia Union for homecoming in 2 years.
How about you don't schedule? Don't don't schedule. Don't schedule Virginia schools. Yeah. Pay attention. Somebody pay attention to your schedule in the future. Probably the more surprising game would be for St. Augustine, who would get their first win of the season with a 20-12 victory over Livingstone. They would get a win over, Livingstone started out with a 4-0 record, then, of course, had that beat down by Virginia Union, and now they give up They give up the ghost to the winless St. Aug Falcons. Prop to them. And, St. Aug gave up a first win of the year to Elizabeth City State last week. So, they're just sharing the joy for your fellow conference members. But I think that's a tough loss for Livingstone, who might have counted that victory, and now they drop to 1-2. They dropped to 1-2 in the conference, and that was their first division loss. So, they fall a few spots below some other teams in the standings. Virginia State with a 54-21 win over Elizabeth City. Just mentioned that. Winston-Salem with a 23-17 win over Johnson C. Smith. Now, sadly, I hate to report that this game was marred by a post-game scuffle, and there is some video, and I saw some video of this on social media, on Twitter, and it didn't look good. There were a couple different skirmishes there, and this sort of broke out in the handshake line. So guys from one side or the other, not really sure who started it. I think there's a statement that came out by the conference that they will investigate, and they're looking into the film, trying to get cooperation from both schools. But there may be some suspensions, and so that would be unfortunate for Winston-Salem, who, with the win, they are now 1-0 in the division, 1-2 in conference play. And the Rams have played teams very close this year, and just now, it's unfortunate that would happen. And so we will see how this shakes out in the wash, so to speak, AD. And so that covers all the games from the I just want to make sure I mention everything. Yeah, that covers all of them. Some from the CIAA. So quick rundown of the standings. Over in the Northern Division, unbeaten teams, and again, let's clarify, this is the conference that does division, then conference. So Bowie, Virginia State, and Virginia Union all sitting at 1-0 in division, 3-0 in conference play. And then you have Elizabeth City State, Shawan, and Lincoln, PA, all of them with 1-2 records, or 0-1 records in a division. Elizabeth City State, they are 1-2 in conference, while Shawan and Lincoln are winless. I safe to say, AD, I think it's a 3-team race now in the Northern Division, so we'll see how that plays out. Over in the Southern Division, it's Fayetteville State and Winston-Salem and St. Augustine's who are 1-0 in division. In conference, though, it's Fayetteville with a 3-0 record, while the Rams and the Falcons are sitting at 1-2. It seems like everybody else is sitting at 1-2 as well in the conference, but Livingstone, Johnson C. Smith, and Shaw are all 0-1 in conference. So that is the CIAA. Let's go to our number 5 ranked team in the BCSN Top 5 under D1 category, and that's the West Virginia State Yellow Jackets, AD, and they would come up with a big win, another close contest. These guys love to keep it within 7-6 points. They don't do it easy, but they find a way to get a win as they pull away with a 42-38 win over Fairmont State in Fairmont, West Virginia. And the Yellow Jackets, AD, are sitting 5-0 in the conference, 5-1 overall with a 3-game winning streak. Your thoughts on this game and the Yellow Jackets?
Well, for a team that, I'll be honest with you, I had never paid attention to before this year, they have really they've really surprised me, and then dominate this conference. They were not picked to win the conference, but they are right now the front runners in the conference, and with a 5-0 record and all 5 of those wins coming against Division II teams, they are setting themselves up to get a possible playoff berth and possibly even host a first round game in the Division II playoffs. And Dustin Krauser continues to have a big day for this Yellow Jackets defense, piling up 13 tackles and recovering a fumble. And coming into this weekend, Dustin Krauser was tied at number 4 in the nation in tackles per game at 11.6. That was coming into this particular game. We'll talk about the updated stats later on in one of our shows later on this week, Ryan. But kudos to this West Virginia State team, and hopefully we'll be able to set something up where we can talk to the people at West Virginia State and find out a little bit more about their program and what they are doing and what they put in their West Virginia mountain water to get these boys to play like they're playing.
Yeah, definitely. And I got to give a mention to Austin Hensley, the quarterback for the Yellow Jackets. 28 of 36 pass attempts, 414 yards, and another 6-touchdown performance by somebody as he once again joins the esteemed 6-touchdown club. And he was already coming into the contest one of the top 20 ranked passers in Division II, along with Slade Jarman and Charles Saffold of Clark. And Hensley did everything right this weekend, and so he will most likely move up a little bit in the standings. It should be noted, on that, and of course we've talked about the format of the Mountain East before. West Virginia currently sitting in second place. In first place, though, is a school called Notre Dame College. No affiliation to the Notre Dame University in South Bend, Indiana, but Notre Dame College is in first place in this division, and they are, statistically, you just go look at the stats, off the charts. And so West Virginia State, they've got a lot of games before they even see them in November, the last game of the season. But let's just say this, AD, the success that West Virginia State and the conference is having has moved the Yellow Jackets to number 1 as the number 1 rated HBCU Division II team on our Versus Sports rankings. And so those, the computers, among all the Division II HBCUs, the computers love West Virginia State over Bowie, over Virginia Union, Virginia State, Albany State, Miles, all of those teams that we have ranked in our poll and think highly of. Guess who's ranked above all of them by about 7 or 8 spots, and that would be West Virginia State. So the Yellow Jackets are doing something right. That conference is doing something right, and it's. I was saying keep this in mind. A true round robin in that conference, no conference championship game. Right, for sure. Let's make mention of a couple other games before we get close to wrapping up here, AD. And let me start with the game that we broadcast. That was in Jacksonville. It was the inaugural AME Classic. It was also Edward Waters' homecoming game. They get the 48-14 win over Allen University. And I would say Deshaun Hughey had 12 rushes, 117 yards on the heels of a 182-yard performance the week before. he had an outstanding 62 or 60-yard run, which I made sure to retweet it from our Twitter page. So if you go to my BCSN, the number one, you will see or you can find the retweet of that video. It was just an outstanding atmosphere. I think there were, I saw the report, maybe there were like 4,200 people in attendance. Both sides, you know, the Allen University side, the Edward Waters side were packed. It was a good crowd. It was a good crowd. And we've got a supplement interview with head coach Greg Ruffin that you can listen to as well. And we kind of talk a little bit about what Edward Waters has gone through this season, just coming off of a 4-game road trip and get the win. And now the second half of the season, they play some real powerhouses from the SIAC. So a tough road there. Your thoughts from what you saw as you were watching the game, AD?
Looks like, number one, Edward Waters was happy to be at home as they took control of the game early and did not relinquish their lead in this particular game. So, you know, I'm pretty sure these kids were happy to be at home, to be able to sleep in their own beds, and to play in familiar grounds once again. They'll be home again this week in the, I guess we're going to dub this the Ruffin Bowl, Bryan, as
Ruffin Bowl 1. Yes, sir.
Ruffin Bowl 1, as Greg and Reginald will be taking each other on in Duval County. And that'll be a game that we'll all be there on this particular Saturday. 6 o'clock start, I believe, on that particular game, Bryan, as we'll be broadcasting that game. So, you know, it just with the young team that Greg Ruffin has this year, it's just been tough, especially when you consider the step up in competition as they have gone from a completely NAIA schedule on last year to a all HBCU, mostly Division II schedule with 2 D1 sprinkled into that schedule.
Right. Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, it's a challenging schedule, but just the atmosphere was great. A lot of history. Both schools, you know, their first meeting was 1945. Something I did not know. I learned, you know, a little bit of the history of the school. You know, also Allen brought their band. Pretty interesting halftime show. Allen, I think, got an introduction to HBCU band Smack Talk, and I don't think they liked it very much. That's all I'll say on that. But it was a good halftime performance by both schools, a great show. I mean, just a lot of positives. And again, I continue to. And I won't talk about it too much here because I know we want to keep this moving. But again, the product, the HBCU football product, man, I can't talk enough about it. What they pulled off in this, it was a nice high school size stadium, and it was encouraging to see this come off the way it did for Edward Waters. It's a big win. And I just, you know, I think with Miles coming up, you got Savannah State coming up, you got Tuskegee coming up. All home games. I really hope the folks in the Jacksonville area continue to support this program and team as they continue to grow and build. And it is a process, and there are a few tough L's right now. But pretty soon the day will come when we're not talking about a team full of freshmen and sophomores. And so that's encouraging. So we're looking forward to Ruffin Bowl 1. Again, that's Miles College versus Edward Waters this upcoming Saturday. 6 p.m. will be the kickoff and broadcast on the Black College Sports Network. Moving over to the NAIA, 16th ranked Langston College. What is the streak up to, AD? Because with a 34-16 win over Arizona Christian, Langston extends their conference winning streak to, let's see if you notice off the top of your head.
I want to say it's 28, Brian. Am I correct on that?
I don't know. Sounds good. I knew it's in the 20s. That sounds correct. If it's wrong, we'll clarify it. We'll have to keep a mental note as we go into the pregame show for Week 8. We'll just have to keep note of it and see what happens. But Langston picks up the win. And look, if you don't know the name Tim Whitfield yet, Mark, put it down. I'm telling you now, he is a candidate for Black College Player of the Year. And if he's not, he should be. I know there's some other names playing at some bigger schools, but Tim Whitfield is playing and putting up numbers just as high and playing just as well as some of those other guys. In this game, he had 226 yards rushing, scored 3 times, and look, that's all. It just went from there. As Langston had a 21-0 lead at halftime, and so that's just where this game is going. And I tell you, Langston, man, I don't have enough words, AD, to talk about this team. Your thoughts on Langston and Tim Whitfield?
Looks like we're going to have another playoff run out there in Oklahoma as Langston continues to move up the NAIA polls. Another 400 yards of total offense by the Langston Lions, and they held the Firestorm to 264 yards of total offense. Also, kudos to Malcolm Johnson leading the way with 12 tackles for the Langston Lions.
All right, moving on. Final scores, Texas College losing at home to Ottawa 76-21. Didn't quite break the 100-point barrier, although they tried. That game was final. Hampton suffers their first conference loss just a week after getting their first conference win. They fall to Gardner-Webb 35-27. You had Lincoln, Missouri, losing to Nebraska Kearney 44-0. Tennessee State losing at home to Murray State 31-17. Chris Rowland, the nation's leader in receiving yards, all-purpose yards, and he's like right around the top in receptions. 14 catches, 140-something yards this past weekend. That's all he does. He's a
10-game streak.
Back on that streak, exactly. Back on that streak, and that pretty much wraps up every score from this past week. AD, we didn't get a chance to chop it up and just talk about our at midway point, our top 5 players of the year for the Black College football season. Can you share your 5? I've got my 5. Can you share your 5 if you can recall who they are?
I do not have those in front of me. I thought we were going to do that on a separate show this week, Brian, so I did not pull those.
That's fine. No worries. We'll do that. We'll do that another show. It's no worries. But let's do this.
But I do have my player of the week for this week, though.
Okay, well, let's go. Let's transition to the players of the week for offense and defense, and I'll let you go first.
My player of the week, we'll start with defense first, and that's going to be West Virginia State's Dusty Crozer. Had a big day for the Yellow Jackets on defense. He had 13 tackles, 10 of them solo, and a fumble recovery in the West Virginia State victory over this past weekend. My offensive player of the week, Bowie State junior quarterback Jerome Johnson from Washington, D.C. He was responsible for 6 touchdowns. He led the Bulldogs' ground attack with a career-high 193 yards on the ground. That was on 11 rushes right there. 3 touchdowns on the ground, touchdowns of 11, 57, and 40 rushing. He also had 97 yards passing on 9 of 14, 3 touchdowns, 1 INT, and he had passing touchdowns of 16, 3, and 29 yards on the day. So I think he cemented his job as the full-time starter for the Bowie State Bulldogs, and he is my offensive player of the week.
Well, AD, so I haven't gone too far from I haven't gone too deep down the rabbit hole in researching my defensive player of the week. But as I did a couple of weeks ago or earlier in the year, when you have a player that makes spectacular plays and they sort of impact or the outcome or get really close to impacting the outcome, I think we got to find some room to recognize those guys. I did that a few weeks back with, I believe the young man's name was Brian Davis of Bowie State, who blocked 2 punts against Shaw that led to Bowie's win over Shaw. And I'm going to do the same this week for a young man by the name of Terrence McCray of South Carolina State. Now, the stats that I'm reading only show that he had 1 block, although in the broadcast of the actual game, they make mention that he had 2 blocks, that he actually blocked not only the first punt, the first Chris Fadul punt that led to a touchdown, but he also blocked the second one, which helped South Carolina State rally from a 11-point deficit and eventually kind of have the lead in this contest with his second punt. And I think what was impressive with the second punt for McCray is that the South Carolina State coaches appeared to call off the punt block and wanted more of a punt safe or protection setup. McCray either went Rambo on his own or he didn't hear the call because he still went full steam ahead and got the block on Fadul's punt, and it turned into a touchdown. So I guess it was a good thing that he didn't hear the instructions, because for a moment it gave South Carolina State hope. Unfortunately, a little too much excessive celebrating caught them on the backside.
And then on the no, yes play.
Yeah, right. No, yes. Oh, no, don't. Yeah, definitely. And then on the offensive side, I'm going to go to Ryan Stanley, FAMU's quarterback, 30 of 49, 427 yards, 3 touchdowns, threw 2 picks. The fact that not only did he become FAMU's all-time leading passing yardage holder, he set a career high for himself, 427 yards. And every time there was a negative play, whether it was him throwing the interception or the block punts, he led FAMU back down the field to a score. It was one of the top moments of the game that will probably be overlooked by a lot of people, but it has to be stated that is leadership, and that's what you need from a quarterback. And I think right now it's for Offensive Player of the Year in the MEAC, it's a 2-man show now between Jermaine Martin and Ryan Stanley. We'll get a chance to see both of them do their thing this upcoming week. And then, who knows? Sky's the limit. But that's going to be my player of the week. And so congratulations, Ryan Stanley, Terrence McCray. Who were your 2 guys again, AD?
My 2 were Jerome Johnson and Dustin Crozer.
Right. So congratulations to those guys. We'll make sure to award them or recognize them on our page, Facebook page, and so on and so forth. Let's wrap the show with the final tally of our homecoming winners and losers from this past week. You want to do that roll call, AD? Winners and losers for homecoming this past weekend.
people who can cash the checks from the alumni with pride: Albany State, Alcorn State, Bowie State, Edward Waters, Kentucky State, and Morgan State. And
Could be a state university.
Yeah, well, we got some states on the other side too, though, Brian. But the people who better make sure that they go to the check writer's bank and cash it and not put it into their own account first, because they may cancel that check or it may bounce. Those teams are going to be our homecoming losers: Benedict, Central State, Howard, Jackson State, Lincoln, PA, and Texas Southern. This past week, homecoming teams were 500, 6-6, and for the season, our homecoming teams are 13-7. We've got a number of homecomings on tap for this upcoming week. I'll quickly go through those, Brian. Savannah State is at Clark in Atlanta, 2 o'clock, Panther Stadium. Elizabeth City State is hosting Lincoln, PA, 1:30 in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. Fort Valley State hosts Morehouse at Fort Valley, 2 o'clock, Wildcat Stadium. Lane hosts Kentucky State. That ought to be an interesting battle. 2 o'clock, Lane Field, Jackson, Tennessee. Lincoln, Missouri hosts Northeast Missouri State in Jefferson City, Missouri, Dwight T. Reed Stadium, 2 o'clock Central on that game. That lane time also was the Central time that I gave you. Prairie View hosts Virginia Lynchburg, and Virginia Lynchburg is this year's Mississippi Valley State, appearing on multiple homecomings schedules on the road. That game's in Prairie View, Blackshear Stadium, 2 o'clock Central time. South Carolina State hosts Morgan State in Orangeburg, Oliver Dawson Stadium, 1:30 Eastern time. Shaw hosts Livingston in Raleigh, North Carolina, George Williams Athletic Complex, and that's a noon kickoff. So get your brunch on for your tailgate on that particular game, Brian. Tennessee State hosts Austin Peay, and that game is going to be at Nissan Stadium in Nashville, Tennessee. They get to play in the big boy stadium for homecoming, Brian. Virginia State, Bowie State. That game is going to be on the Spire. That game comes on at 2 o'clock, and that is in Ettrick, Virginia, Rogers Stadium. Besides the fact that that is homecoming for Virginia State, that is going to be one of the top games of the weekend. Mark my word on that one, Brian.
For sure.
And our last homecoming game is Virginia Union hosting Shawan in Richmond, Virginia, Hovey Field at 1 o'clock Eastern time.
All right, that's a great list of games, 11 of them. And so we'll definitely get ready for our Week 8 preview show. We'll just, we can flat out tell you by far and away the game of the week will be North Carolina A&T traveling to Florida A&M. We will find 6 other games to spotlight as well when we do our show.
Virginia State,
this upcoming week.
Bowie State will be in one of those games, so we need to find 5 others.
Yeah, for sure. Our top 5, our BCSN top 5 Division I and under D1 polls will come out later in the week as we as voters will put that together. I'm going to give you my 5 right now. Again, this is not an official BCSN poll. This is just my votes as it is. This is what I will be submitting. My under D1 will look like this. It'll be Bowie State 1, Virginia Union 2, Miles 3, West Virginia State 4, and Langston 5. Just sitting outside of my top 5, I've got Albany State, Virginia State, and Fort Valley State sitting outside of my top 5. My top 5 on the D1 side, Of course, number 1 will still be North Carolina A&T. Number 2, sticking with Alcorn State. Number 3, FAMU, who I've moved up a spot. I believe previously I had FAMU ranked 4th. I've moved them up to 3. 4th is Bethune-Cookman. And 5th, I moved Southern into the 5 spot. I think had Alabama A&M not lost to Grambling, I probably would have had Alabama A&M in that spot, but that was a tough loss by the Bulldogs. So it's interesting that among A&T, FAMU, and Bethune, all MEAC schools, all winners of anywhere from 3 to 5 in a row, and their only loss of the year to FBS schools. North Carolina A&T lost to Duke, and in-state teams at that. North Carolina A&T lost to Duke in North Carolina school. FAMU lost to UCF, Florida in-state school. Bethune-Cookman lost to Miami, another in-state school. So, I mean, right now, those 3 teams are sitting there, all unbeaten, sort of outside of the FBS team on their schedule, and it's going to set up for an interesting run to the finish line. So,
I can give you my 5 right quick that I've already submitted my votes, Bryan.
Oh, okay. All right.
FCS, A&T 1, Bethune 2, Alcorn 3, FAM 4. I still left South Carolina State in. That's what you call an impressive loss or a good loss. The loss to FAMU this past week. In my Division II NAIA poll, Bowie 1, Virginia Union 2, West Virginia State 3, Miles 4, Langston 5. Pretty much unchanged from my submission last week.
Okay. Well, we'll see how those votes compare to our other voters, and we'll release our top 5 poll in the middle of the week. We will also be going through some of our superlatives. Stay tuned follow us. Make sure you're following us on Twitter and Instagram at MyBCSN, the number 1. We'll be tweeting out some various stats throughout the season, or throughout the week, rather. And once we know some opening lines, we'll kind of publish that as well. Any final thoughts, AD, before we close the show out here?
No, just another interesting week. These conferences will start to take shape over the next 2 weeks. So just be prepared for some good old-fashioned black college football.
All right, well said. So looking forward to week number 8 in the season. Week 7 was a good one. Wrap it up, put it to a close. We want to encourage you, check out our supplemental interviews with head coach Willie Simmons off the win against South Carolina State. Greg Ruffin off the win against Allen University, and Reginald Ruffin off the win against Benedict. All 3 of those separate interviews will be part of our features that you can see on Facebook. We'll also make sure to post those on Instagram and Twitter. They should be up sometime, if the same day as this show goes up, fingers crossed. And that'll do. So encourage you to continue to listen. Share the show with a couple of friends if you would. And I'm going to close the show now and say thank you for AD Drew. I want to definitely, again, thank our coaches who I interviewed earlier. And I'm Bryan Fulford, and thank you for listening, and peace out.
Holla.
But you stay hard.